has been developed by state and provincial agencies in association with the Agency for Instructional Television. Together, serving education.
An anthology about the bad, the short-lived, and the forgotten shows and events in television history. This is It Was a Thing on TV.
Punisher! Control! Hurry before I change my mind!
I give you Super Train.
Episode 493, submission number 239. 1970s and 1980s 15-minute educational shows on PBS. We should also add, these shows did occasionally go into the 1990s, not very late, maybe 1990, 1991, and maybe there's a show out there that we're going to talk about that ran for half an hour. But still, these are shows that you would typically see on your PBS affiliate in the 70s and 80s, and again, early 90s, generally between the hours of like 9 and 5, whenever they're not showing Electric Company and Sesame Street and all the other shows that we know and love that we grew up with. All right, guys, this is the last time we're going back to school for this year, and we're going to actually take an educational twist now. We talked about comedies involving education. We talked about reality shows in the past. We've never actually gotten into actual education, actual learning. I know we don't really, learn around here, but we're going to sort of deviate off of that for this episode. So this episode is going to be a little different because I've broken up everything by subject material, and we're going to treat them as periods. It's just like going back to school. So we got period 1, period 2, period 3, all the way down to period 6. And you're even going to hear a bell when the period is up. Hee 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 hee. Ain't I a stinker? So period 1, we're going to start with ELA, English Language Arts. And just to give you an idea as to a 15-minute show, this is not something we're going to talk about terribly deep. But an example of it is the letter people. And if you are somebody who grew up anywhere from about 1975 through probably about 1990, maybe even 95. I think 90 would sort of be the cutoff. You know the letter people. I never experienced the letter people as a child in terms of in the classroom because I skipped kindergarten, believe it or not. So I didn't learn the letter people. I knew my letters apparently, and they just said, you go to first grade. And I said, yay. But the letter people, they would introduce a letter of the day. You all know about it, I think. But the big thing is, for years, and I think the letter people was done in 1975, they had merchandise that they'd sell to schools. They'd sell the little booklets and dolls and whatnot. And I think they sold it well into the 90s, which shows the staying power of this show. And if you need a flashback, I found out earlier today doing a little searching, like every letter people show is on YouTube. And they have them in 2-hour blocks of 8 episodes. So you can watch block 1 through 8 and then 9 to 16 and so on and so forth. And I think that's a great way to get your letter people fix from 40, 35, 30 years ago at this point. So we start off with basic letters, and now we're going to sort of spread out a little bit. We're going to talk about writing. And specifically, there's a couple of shows I want to mention. One of them is called The Right Channel. And this was from the late 70s. And The Right Channel involved a bug. Not even kidding. It's an animated bug, not a real-life bug. But this bug, by the name of RB Bug, he was a television reporter, and he wanted to get in the business. So he went to Channel 85 WORD in Egg City, Calistonia. Yeah, it's fake. Obviously, you can't have a Channel 85, and who's ever heard of Calistonia? So he takes his writing to the news director by the name of Red Green. No, we're not talking about the Red Green show, if you remember that on PBS back in the 90s and 2000s. This is a character played by a female named Red Green who gives him ideas about how to improve his writing. And ultimately, at the end of the show, they show the end result if you do certain modifications. Okay, if you do this and you do this, look how much better this flows. So this was a great show when it came to capitalization, punctuation, grammar, usage. But I think the part of the show that people remember is the last part of the show was called The Club. And the big part that people remember is the slogan of the club was Palabra Jat. Palabra being Spanish for word, and Jat just meaning to write. So basically, Palabra Jat just means write words. And that was what they were encouraging the viewers to do, the kids, write words. A similar show, a little different though for a number of reasons, is called Right On. And I remembered this. Oh my gosh, I had flashbacks when I was looking up stuff for this episode and got to Right On. The music just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's very similar to the Right Channel, but it's only 5 minutes long. But even the setting is the same. There's no bug, but it was set in not really a TV studio or a TV newsroom, but it was a newsroom of a newspaper. And they dealt with the same things. Capitalization, grammar, structure, the basics of writing. But again, they did it in a 5-minute window, not a 15-minute window. So they were really on the ball, if you will. Another show which got into structure and mechanics, which I'm going to cover very briefly, is Fins, Feathers, and Fur. Very similar, but this was set at like a pet store, but they did writing on the side, not involving the pets. That's where the Fins, Feather, and Fur come in. But they did the same thing, like outlining, writing. Very similar type of show. So that's covering the writing aspect. The next thing I want to cover is the actual etymology of words. And again, this is a show that I remember back in the day. It's called Wordsmith. And actually, the person who hosted the show, his last name was Smith, coincidence or otherwise. More specifically, a gentleman by the name of Bob Smith. And what this dealt with, again, it's a 15-minute show, it dealt with a single root word. So, for example, the full episode that's online dealt with the root audi, A-U-D-I, like audio, audience, stuff like that. And basically, this wordsmith deconstructed the root word and showed how it's used in everyday language and how it ties back to the definition of the root. So again, audi means sound, voice. So they got into audio, they got into audible, inaudible, audience, anything that had to do with sound that had the AUD or AUDI root. So no, they didn't get into the car, the Audi.
Oh, darn.
Well, I'm guessing it's because if you have a car that makes sounds, that may not be a good thing.
I was going to mention auditorium.
You're absolutely right there. I don't remember seeing that on the episode, but that doesn't mean it wasn't on the episode. But again, anything with the AUD or AUDI root, they get to the important words. Like I said, audible, inaudible, audio, auditory. I don't think they did auditorium. I could be wrong there. Audience, I know they did absolutely for sure. So yeah, that broke down this root and said, hey, this root can be seen in this word and this word and this word and this word, and just like covered the whole spectrum of words that use that root. 2 more series I want to cover in ELA before our bell rings because we're running out of time and I got to send you guys to the next class. One that, again, I remember as a kid, and once I found it on YouTube, I watched a couple of episodes, and it's called The Book Bird. I don't understand why it's called The Book Bird, because the opening of the show, yes, there was a claymation animation sequence where a bird looked like an owl of some sort, or some sort of hawk or something, did chase around a worm, but then after the bird caught up with the worm, they started dancing. And there's no mention of the book bird or any birds really outside of that open. Okay. We'll call it the book bird. We'll have this opening, which is really well done, and especially given it's 1978 roughly, and this is PBS, and the open was claymation for a minute. This was not like a 30-second or a 15-second open. This is a full minute. That must have cost PBS quite a pretty penny. Or maybe not PBS, but one of the subsidiaries, if you will, whichever station or affiliate actually produced the show.
I remember the host of the Book Bird, guy by the name of John Robbins. He would spend like 15 minutes sketching out key scenes from the book in that series, and he took that idea and produced 2 more shows, cover to cover, and more books from cover to cover. I believe they came out of Greater Washington area.
Yeah, so that was the draw of the Book Bird, was while he's telling the story or just giving the sort of Cliff Notes version of it, he's actually doing drawings, and nice drawings at that. And then about 10 years later, as Chico said, there was a show called Cover to Cover. Same guy, different production staff, obviously a little bit updated graphics. This is about 1988 or so, but essentially the same show. He gives a brief little recap of a well-known book and does some art related to that book. Oh, there's the bell. First period's done, so get to your second period class, and I'll see you later for some more ELA. Well, no, you're not, because this is the only time we're doing this, and these are the only shows that I really wanted to cover. So, second period time. We're going to get into social studies now. And the first show we're going to cover in social studies is Inside Out. This was a show from 1972 to 1973, and it was a 15-minute show. This was maybe not a social studies type of show. I lumped it here because it was like an anthology type of show. It showed cultures and traditions that maybe students had never seen before, especially given it's now 1972, 73, 74, 75, what have you. And obviously television is getting a little more popular than it was in the 50s and 60s, especially educational television. So now you're sort of seeing the world around you. And this series ran for 30 episodes. I so want to say 2 crock blocks minus 2, but I was trying to avoid that this episode. Oh well. It had a little bit of controversy. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of topics, and this is actually on Wikipedia, all 30 topics. How do you show strong feelings? Must I or may I? Can do, can't do. Brothers and sisters. You belong. Yes, I can. Sense of joy. Yeah, I put this in with social studies, but really, this may apply better to the 6th period section. Not going to get into that just yet, but when we get to 6th period, you'll totally understand where we're going with that. Another show, again, related to social studies and cultures and maybe even anthropology a little bit, was called Trade-Offs. I didn't see any of this on YouTube, so I can't really comment on what it was about.
Well, I can. I remember AIT, the Agency for Instructional Television. They had this show, Trade-Offs, was basically the basics of economies taught to a children's audience. They had a sequel series called Give and Take for a slightly older audience.
One other show that I've put under the category of social studies, even though it may lie a little more towards the science aspect, is a show called Big Blue Marble. This was a half-hour show. And again, this got into different cultures, sort of social studies-ish, but also when you're talking about Big Blue Marble, obviously that's talking about the Earth. And they dig into a little science from what I saw, which there's actually quite a bit of it on YouTube. Do a little bit of searching and you'll find some of these channels where it's just a treasure trove of old educational TV shows. It's amazing how much stuff is out there that people recorded back in the 80s or early 90s or even the 70s. So there's the bell. We're going to go to third period, and we're actually going to stay in science. And there's only 2 shows we're going to cover, but oh my gosh, these 2 shows, these were things that I remembered from like 40 years ago. Now, the first one, not really a show per se. I went with a name. And if you do a search on this name, you're going to find a lot of stuff about this guy. Julius Sumner Miller. There is footage from, I believe, the 10 Network in Australia from back in the 60s. It's black and white of him doing sciencey stuff. But again, doing some searching earlier today, I found, again, in 2-hour blocks of 8 episodes, each one being 15 minutes, obviously, him doing science experiments. And I don't know, I think it's laughable, not the science experiments themselves, but he gets so into this whole thing. I mean, yeah, we get into the TV shows and we cover, who did this, and we cover some of the backstories and whatnot. But I mean, this guy did this with physics. He's talking about Archimedes and Archimedes' screw, and he's talking about this piece of literature in ancient Greek times and naming the author and when it was written. And he's getting into like Rene Descartes and just throwing names out left and right and formulas and theories and whatnot. And it seems like anytime he wanted to show something, he would actually, before showing how it worked, he would declare proof. So you're watching this and he's like, okay, well, why does this figure have this center of gravity here? Proof! Because this and da-da-da-da-da, and just, like tying everything together. It's almost like an intricate proof from like geometry back in the day, like a math proof that I would have had to like endured when I was getting my degree 20 plus years ago. The proof isn't as simple as short explanation. The proof is reason A, reason B, reason C, reason D, reason E. He's just putting everything together and he's leaving no stone unturned. So there's no way you could say, well, you didn't prove this. No, he is proving like every single aspect, so there's no doubt as to what's going on. But he just comes across as an older professor type. If you've taken a professor back in the 2000s or 90s or 80s, you know what I'm talking about. Just sort of the kind of stodgy, kind of, it's my way or the highway, emphasis type of how to do this stuff. And it's very comical, but it's also, again, very educational because he does a lot of physics. And actually related to that, the second thing I'm going to talk about in science, the Kinetic Carnival of Gerald Walker. That name doesn't mean anything to you guys. But Gerald Walker not necessarily means a lot to me, but he is a legend at Cleveland State University. He's been teaching physics there for 50 years now, still working. And when I took physics at Cleveland State 23 years ago, 22 years ago, I wanted to be in his class because he made physics that much fun. Unfortunately, I didn't get into his class, but I still had fun in the class, and the professor that I had was still pretty fun. It wasn't Gerald Walker fun, but not going to complain. I passed the class, got an A, learned some stuff. I learned some ideas about how to teach, not science necessarily, but math in my class because of how he did this stuff. But Gerald Walker is an absolute legend at Cleveland State. And his show, Kinetic Carnival, was all about physics. Not unlike Julius Sumner Miller, but even taking it a step further. Gerald Walker, and again, this is something that he's known for showing in his class. I'm sure the videotape is probably snapped at this point because he's shown it so often. He appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, I believe in 1987. And he did some experiments to show, hey, people can do this safely without burning or dying or injuring themselves. So what he did on Carson, he laid down on a bed of nails, and then he did like walking on hot coals without burning himself. And I don't know if this is on Carson, but another thing he did was he dipped his hand into molten lead and obviously survived. He didn't lose any fingers or burn himself, much to the satisfaction of his mother, who was watching at that time. I don't think Mom even knew he was going to dip his hand in molten lead. A lot of what Gerald Walker covered on Kinetic Carnival is stuff that actually was done on Carson. He did a lot of these experiments that you can replicate at home. I think he even like walked on glass, just doing different things related to physics. Basically sort of proving, when you're talking about the bed of nails, yeah, if you lie on one nail, you're putting all the body pressure on that one part of the nail, and that nail is going to go through you. But if you have hundreds of nails, when you lie down, that pressure is spread out amongst the 100 nails or 200 nails or 500 nails, however many hundreds of nails. Sort of like the theory of if you take a needle and poke a balloon, it'll pop. But if you have multiple nails or multiple pins, it's not going to pop the balloon. Oh, there's the bell for third period. So now we're going to go to fourth period. And fourth period is math. We love our Square One TV around here. There's one thing that, outside of MathNet, that I think Square One TV was lacking in. It didn't do much in terms of real-life applications. And really, if you've been a student the last 10 to 15 years, that is what's really being pushed. How are you going to use this algebra in real life? How are you going to use this geometry in real life? This trig, this calculus, the statistics, probabilities. So even though Square One TV didn't cover that aspect that much, at least in the first 20 minutes of each episode, a show called Math Wise did. Again, it was a 15-minute show, but it covered applications of different concepts. So I was watching one episode earlier today on measurements, and they were getting into area. So they said, yeah, I have this little square, and I can figure out how many of these little squares are in this yard, but that could take days. There's got to be an easier way. Yeah, the area formula is length times width. So if you measure length and you measure width, there's your volume. And then if you have a little cutout there, you've got to figure out the area of that circle or that garden, and you can figure out how much, grass seed you need or how much paint you need for a wall or what have you. That, I think, was really what was lacking in terms of math TV shows. Because another show I'm going to mention, even though there's no video of it, I remember this from 40 plus years ago. There was a math show called Measure Up. May have only been on the local PBS affiliate, but I remember Measure Up, and that was just, again, math concepts without the application. And I think Measure Up was intended for like a 5 to 8 year old, not like a 13 to 16-year-old which was the age range I consider Math Wise to be aiming towards. But there are other math programs, and believe it or not, you can find a lot of educational series on Indiana University's library's webpage, specifically the Agency for Instructional Technology, AIT, who you heard in the open. So if you go to this website, the AIT website on Indiana University's library server, it's got a ton of series, including a math one called It Figures, a 28-part series tackling everything from basic arithmetic to complex problem-solving equations. See kids-centered learning in real-life situations. Okay, that gets into a little bit of the application piece we talked about earlier. And then another math series that's on this page is called MathWorks. Again, 28 episodes, introducing advanced elementary and middle school learners to basic mathematics. Each episode emphasizes a particular skill or math formula that can be applied to solve real-world problems. And not even joking, taking a look at this page, just doing a quick count here, there are 33 different full series of educational television shows, some of which we've talked about, some of which we're going to talk about in a little bit, some of which we're not going to talk about, period. But they're there for you to take a look at. And with that, fourth period is done. 2 more periods ago. Period 5, we're going to talk about foreign language. Specifically 2 shows. One I really remember from my childhood. The other one, not so much because I wasn't interested in German. We'll start with that. Guten Tag. I don't think I was able to find any of this online. The reason I say that is I found a Guten Tag TV show, but it was just people speaking German. And there would definitely be an aspect of, well, here's what they're saying, or here's how you say this in German. It wouldn't just be German conversation. But the one I remember is a show called Parlez-moi. It's a French language show. And this show, the main character, his name was Sal, a clown, sort of like an Emmett Kelly type of clown, maybe kind of hobo-ish. And this show centered around everyday activities that Sal might go through and using certain terms, certain phrases that you might commonly use in those settings. So maybe he goes to a restaurant and the waiter says, "What would you like to order?" And then there's the French translation of it, which I don't remember. I'm not even going to try recalling my French from 35 years ago. But there's, I believe, 40 episodes, and every episode had him in a different situation. You know, at the restaurant, going on an airplane. Even there's an episode where Saul went on a game show. So whatever phrases you'd use on a game show, you know, you win the grand prize or stuff like that. Now, as you heard, the bell rang, so we're going to go to our last period. We're going to talk about self-growth and self-education. The first show I want to talk about, and this is not a joke, there was a show called The Clyde Frog Show back in the 70s. 28 episodes, ran for 3 to 6 minutes per episode, so it's very brief, and it originally aired in 1973 and 1974. And as you might guess, the only reason I'm mentioning this show is because it is the namesake of Eric Cartman's favorite stuffed toy on South Park, Clyde Frog. I am absolutely blown away that South Park actually used an educational TV show to name one of its characters, or one of the dolls of one of its characters. Clyde Frog. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. Aren't you just amazed by that, Greg? We have a Clyde Frog reference from South Park, and it was actually an educational show back in the 70s.
Jeez.
And actually, if you take a look on the Wikipedia page, they have a title shot, a screenshot of the title screen. And that Clyde Frog does look like the Clyde Frog that Cartman had back in the day. Again, I just wanted to mention this show because of that. I don't even think there's any video of it online. But once I saw there was a Clyde Frog TV show, I had to delve in and see, is this actually like the namesake of Clyde Frog on South Park? Lo and behold, the answer is affirmative. Absolutely yes.
I found it.
You found it?
It's a 3-minute segment, but yeah, I found it.
The next series we're going to talk about is actually called Think About. So we're going to talk about Think About. And Think About is actually one of the shows that's on that AIT page I mentioned earlier. And you can see the full series. Their description of it is immerse yourself in this 60-part series that helps 5th and 6th graders become independent learners and improve skills in critical thinking and reasoning skills. So again, the self-improvement aspect, study skills, critical thinking skills, reasoning skills, stuff that really is being pushed big time nowadays. Now, I know Think About is from the 70s and 80s, but good heavens, the last like 10 years or so, you've got to push rigor and you've got to push critical thinking skills in the classroom, because that's how you develop good 21st century citizens competing in this world economy. You've got to have them critically think and create and develop and use their full potential of their mind. The last show we're going to talk about, and again, this is on the AIT page as well, Bread and Butterflies. Yeah, it's a different type of title, but it has nothing really to do with bread and has nothing to do with butterflies. It has to actually do with career choices and vocational development for kids between the ages of 9 and 12. Maybe you're baking bread, or maybe you want to learn how to catch butterflies and do some sort of scientific stuff with butterflies. I don't know. I don't get it, but again, it's a series from the 70s, and they did some wacky drugs in the 70s. There's the final bell. Before I let you go for the day, as I said, a lot of this is on YouTube, and also a lot of this is on the AIT website that it'll be linked in the description, but if you go there, like I said, there's a ton of stuff. Just really fast, the titles: Inside Out, Wordsmith, It Figures, Trade-Offs, Bread and Butterflies, Think About, Telltales, which we didn't get into, Your Choice, Our Chance, from the early 90s about drug abuse, Give and Take, about economics, On the Level, which would sort of fall into what we just talked about in terms of self-growth, how to confront real-life problems and process feelings through dramatic scenarios and snappy dialogue. Amigos, which would be a Spanish language TV show. Geography in U.S. history. We talked about Math Wise, All About You, about good health and hygiene and psychological wellness. MathWorks, which we talked about. Read It with John Robbins. We talked about John Robbins earlier when we talked about the book Bird. John Robbins reads illustrated stories that teach elementary school children important lessons and help them build personal values. The Heart of Teaching, designed to help teachers deal with problems like frustration, anger, isolation, change, and pressure. Boy, I think I know what I'm watching after this episode. Arts Alive, which had to do with the performing arts, hosted by Lynn Swan. How about that? So apparently there is life either before or after To Tell the Truth in 1990. Now, he was a good football player. Played for the asshole Steelers, but he was a good football player. Hall of Famer. Global Geography, which dealt obviously with world geography, aimed towards 6th through 9th graders. In other words, a 12-part program on language arts designed to increase the ability of students to communicate effectively in their own lives. and drawing with Paul Rigler. So there's an art program. Sounds maybe not too different from Bob Ross, except Bob Ross is cool. Watch Your Language, a language arts program that uses dramatic storytelling and vocabulary applications to teach about words and their meanings. So that sounds a little bit like Wordsmith, which is, as I mentioned earlier, is on this page. Applied Communication, strategies and techniques for communicating in business settings and everyday workplace situations. Looking from the Inside Out, which actually I think is sort of a follow-up to Inside Out, meaningful conversations about emotions. That helps upper elementary school students process feelings. And then Solve It, learn everyday mathematical skills in dramatic segments that use real-life situations and on-the-job scenarios to teach ways to solve common problems. American Legacy, which has to do with history and geography in the United States. You, Me, and Technology, so there's, again, the scientific aspect. Well with Slim Goodbody. I originally had Slim Goodbody on the list, but I didn't remember him being on PBS all that much. He was more of a Captain Kangaroo person, but he did have a series on PBS.
I do remember that series on PBS when I was little.
They also have the Right Channel, which we talked about earlier, and Measure Metric, 11 14-minute episodes about a different aspect of measurement using the metric system. And I'm guessing this is from the 70s, not just from how it looks, but also there was a big metric push in the 70s. And actually, I just learned, I don't remember where I heard this. I think it might have been Tune In With Me. The first metric highway sign was actually somewhere in Ohio on I-71, which I-71's a very long freeway in Ohio. It's like 300 miles long. I've never seen it, but apparently the first metric sign in the U.S. was on I-71. And then there's a couple of series about understanding taxes. You know, why do we have taxes? Why do we pay taxes? And then Just For Me, designed to help teachers and parents aid children in dealing with the peer pressures of drugs and alcohol use. So like I said, there's like 33 series up here, and you can find more on YouTube. I am pretty sure the entire Parlez Moi series is on YouTube. I think there's 40 episodes, or at least I saw 40 episodes. Julius Sumner Miller, again, takes a little bit of searching, but I believe most of his stuff is up there. Primarily from, like, I think 1969 through the early 70s. I said 1969.
Nice.
Thank you for chiming in. But also, like I said, there's some black and white footage from Australia, which I think dates back to like 64, 65. And then Big Blue Marble, there's a number of episodes on YouTube. Bookbird, there's a number of episodes on YouTube. Cover to Cover and the subsequent series from Cover to Cover, that's on YouTube. Fins, Feathers, and Fur, there's a little bit on YouTube. And Right On, I think I only saw 1 or 2 episodes, but again, once I saw those episodes, big flashback to my childhood. So we talked about many series in this episode. Some good, some memorable, some very forgettable, but the one thing they all have in common is that they all ended up being educational things on TV. So that's not just going to wrap it up for this episode. That's going to wrap it up for Back to School 2024. So please remember that you can listen to all our previous episodes. 492 of them are at itwasthethingontv.com. And on top of that, there's like another 160 different files. Live shows and revisited shows and extended cuts and all sorts of stuff. So go there if you want to catch up to some of the topics you missed in the past. But also, please remember, we are on all social media, minus X. Okay, Twitter. specifically at Instagram and Threads and Mastodon at It Was a Thing on TV, except for Facebook, where you can find us at It Was a Thing on TV podcast. And please do remember, if you want to find us on Mastodon, you need to search for us at It Was a Thing on TV at tvwatch.party. In addition, don't forget we're also available wherever you can find podcasts. Audible, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or just any high-quality independent podcast player. You'll find us quite easily. But please also don't forget we're also on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to our channel. And please do not forget to hit that notification bell to be informed of all future uploads on our channel, including what's coming up next. We're going to give a proper send-off to a TV legend that happened to pass about 2 months ago. We're going to talk about his last self-titled TV show. He did do stuff after this TV show, but this is like the last show where the show was, I don't want to say the show was about him, but the show was about him. His name is in the title. And I really wish at this point we had Susan St. James saying, Bob, like we did with George. Greg, can you possibly find that for us? Is it possible that she said, Bob?
I don't think she said that at WrestleMania 2. Sorry.
Oh, darn. Now I wish we actually had like access to quality AI so we can get that done. So we're going to talk about that Bob, whomever that might be, this Thursday on It Was a Thing on TV. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Chico and Greg. And we'll catch you with that episode later on this week. Oh, give me a roar.
Roar!
And now to close this very educational episode, It Was a Thing on TV presents the Clyde Frog Show episode, Clyde Examines Medicine Cabinet, about pills.
Arg! Eeg! You're getting tired? No, I'm not. Victory is mine! Not yet. The winner! You're no match for Max the Great, Clyde Frog.
How did you get so strong?
My mother gives me vitamins every morning.
Vitamins, huh? I'm gonna get some myself. Some of these pills must be vitamins.
Which ones?
Who knows? I'll just take some of each.
Good idea. Give me some, too.
I'm ready for a rematch.
I don't feel so good.
Me neither. Do you think it was those pills?
Blech.
I'm getting dizzy. Help! Am I alive?
You had a very near miss, Clyde. But you and Max will be all right.
Can I talk to my father?
Only for a minute. You took a lot of pills.
Hi, Dad.
Son, are you all right?
It must have been those pills.
Clyde, Never take anything from the medicine cabinet by yourself.
I thought they were vitamins.
I should be the only person who gives you pills, Clyde. The only people who need medicine are people who are sick. If you take medicine when you're well, you could get sick. You don't like being sick, do you, Clyde?
No, Dad.
Then start following your safety rules. How many times have I told you?
Sorry, Dad.
Well, get some sleep, son, and I'll bring you a present to make you feel better.
Thanks, Dad.
I want you to take one of these every day.
What are they, Doctor?
Safety rules. I never saw a frog who needed them more.